String.format is a very useful and versatile API, but it's bulky, and the business with the placeholder numbers gets confusing. It's error-prone, and it tends to model your intent. It would be better if the values to format in occurred in their place, and that is what this string interpolation syntax here is for. Let's do that in slow motion. This call to string.format goes away, and we add a $sign to signal that this is an interpolated string. Then we remove the placeholder numbers, leaving holes into which we put the expressions to be formatted in right there where they belong. Now push it all together and it's really clear and terse. There are many methods like this, where the body is just a single return statement with a result. For lambda expressions, we already give you a way of getting rid of this boilerplate with a single expression rather than a statement body. So why not do the same for methods? Inspired by lambda syntax, we use the lambda arrow to let you implement a method with just a single expression. This goes for other kinds of function members too. For computed properties, it's often like this, a getter with a single return statement. That's even more boilerplate than the method with 2 levels of curly braces required. Now, you can just write the whole thing like this, a lambda arrow and an expression. There's not even a get keyword. That's implied with the syntax. Let's pause to appreciate how much simpler and clearer this whole class declaration has gotten. All this nipping and tucking has really tightened it up from what you have to write today. This is the kind of effect we hope to have on your everyday code with C#6. But there's still a few more features to go. Here's a method to turn points into JSON objects. Today, you can initialize properties in an object initializer, but index setters like these still have to be assigned in separate statements. Now, we're extending object initializers to let you assign to indices inside them, with the obvious square bracket syntax here. So the J object can be initialized declaratively in one expression. That, by the way, leads to a cascading effect of simplification. We don't need the temporary variable anymore, and now we have this pattern of just a single return statement, so in fact we can turn the whole body into an expression, just like you saw a little bit earlier. Let's also look at a method to turn JSON back into point objects. The logic to actually do that is just one line of code. The bulk of the method, though, is taken up by checking before you do that you actually can do it. And most of that checking is about checking for null. First, we check that JSON itself is not null before we index into it. Then we check twice here that the result of indexing isn't null before we access its type property. Null conditional operators are about making all this null checking here fade into the background. Let's first look at those innermost null checks to get to the type property. We've now removed the explicit null checks and instead make use of this new question dot operator. It works like this. If the left-hand side is null, the whole thing is just null. If the left-hand side is not null, then we can do the dot and that becomes the result. If null, then null. If not, then dot. You'll sometimes hear people refer to the question dot as the Elvis operator. If you look at it, you can see why. It's like 2 eyes with a swoop of hair on top, like Elvis. Meanwhile, we still have that initial null check to see if we can index. But indexing can be done in a null conditional way too. You just insert a question mark in front of the square brackets, and now they only happen if the receiver is not null. And now, the whole if condition just expresses your core intent, which is, if JSON has x's and y's with integer types, then do the following. The essence stands out. The rest fades into the background. A great use of the null conditional dot operator is for triggering events. Today, you trigger an event like this, except the delegate could be null, of course, so you first have to check for that. But this way of checking isn't thread safe. Someone might unsubscribe the last event handler just after you checked, so now it's still null when you get to the dot. Instead, you need to first copy the delegate reference to local before you check and trigger, and now it's gotten really unwieldy. All you wanted to do